through the Gulf of Eilat. On the site of what was once a community center on Tel Aviv's Ben Yehuda Street, the El Al building was erected. Then came the first computers, the newfangled punch tickets. Then came the millionth passenger and Cliff Richard. The newly old and the elderly young mingled on the tarmac. On the airport premises, trainee stewardesses acquired an international polish. Many young girls are just dying to become air hostesses and be taught how to deal with special passengers. 180 milk cows set out on their way from Israel to Iran as part of the plan to export 1,000 cows this year. In 1965, El Al lost 4 bookings. The Beatles weren't allowed into Israel because of fears of a decadent influence on the young. Instead, they flew to Australia. The Shalom Tower rose instead of the Herzliya High School. Tel Aviv inaugurated the first Hilton hotel to have the mezuzah on its doorposts. Bowling started in Haifa with Meir Abachushi and the El Al staff, but El Al was aiming further. I see El Al as a bridge to Jewish communities all over the world. Wherever there's a Jewish community, El Al should try to fly there and encourage tourism, both Jewish and otherwise, from those countries to Israel. 1966, A Man and a Woman by Claude Lelouch. It's a Boeing. It's ours. It's El Al. El Al is a source of pride for Israelis and Jews worldwide. Its passengers have certain special characteristics: pressing lines for the toilets and a tendency for lengthy goodbyes and hellos at airports. And if it's all in the family, then punctuality is never that important. The standing joke that El Al's initials mean every landing always late is a tricky slogan for a commercial airline. (1967). For a state in siege, its air link proves invaluable. On the eve of war, El Al flies in fighters returning for call-up. And as soon as it's all over, hosts of overseas volunteers, Jew and non-Jew alike. 1969. 2 Americans land on the moon and El Al touches down in Addis Ababa, capital of an Ethiopian king known as the Lion of Judah. New orange-colored uniforms are shown off by the air crews, but Israeli television still transmits in black and white. El Al gets its first jet cargo plane. Urgent exports from an isolated nation can only be done by air. The opening up of the European markets was dependent on El Al's services. A flower picked in the Vale of Jezreel can be auctioned off in Amsterdam within less than 24 hours. El Al's freight carriers can take on loads of 40 tons, but in order that they pay their way, they have to be fully laden in both directions. (1971). El Al's first jumbo jet.
When you're down and out, when you're on the street,
and Prime Minister Golda Meir is on hand to welcome it. We had 2 choices, each one harder than the other. To order the Concorde or the 747, which meant a new dimension in technology, but mainly in financing, because this was the first time a plane could, because of its capacity, reduce the running costs to a degree in which flying could be a means of transport for the masses.
של נוסעים בעולם.
This was the most massive investment Israel had ever made in a single item of equipment. In order to absorb the new plane, almost all the airline staff had to undergo some 200 various training courses. 800 new staff were taken on. A new hangar was built.
The Jumbo was a sort of revolution after we'd got used to the 707s. This was due to its size and its capacity. The Jumbo takes on about 3 times more than the 707. The joke was that when it came in fully loaded, people must be getting in on one side and getting off on the other. Otherwise, how could all these people have been on board? The usual turnaround consists of a visual check for any external damage. But with the Jumbo, it's like a long walk. It's a big plane. And we used to say, you need to take camping gear just to get around it.
Once the Jumbo arrived, it put an end to the battle of the charter flights, which El Al had always opposed. Now El Al introduced a new term into the lexicon of international travel, the group flight. But El Al was overexpanding, work relations deteriorating. The great strike was dealt with on Israel Television's satirical program.
העובדים באל על ביקשו ועדת חקירה שתבדוק מה קרה. זה נשמע די נורא. אז באה הנהלה ואמרה להם, לעובדים שביקשו ועדת חקירה שתבדוק מה קרה. בשם הקברניט וצוות הבעלים, שלום, תודה ולהתראות.
To my mind, El Al's finest feature is the devoted service of stewards and stewardesses to mothers and children. It reminds me of the great immigration from Russia, when we had passengers who met Israelis for the first time. Or even didn't know what a nappy or a baby's bottle was. I remember how moved we were on those flights, because we knew that what was most important was the fact that we were these people's first link with Israel. It was very moving, because a look in the eye meant everything. And in the end, we took leave of each other with huge kisses and hugs and blessings. 1977, Egyptian President Anwar Sadat lands in Israel. When we heard that Sadat was coming to Jerusalem, I told my family that if there was ever a return flight taking our Prime Minister to Cairo, I would like to be on it. Because just as I flew a Mustang in '56 to go to war, I'd like to fly a Boeing 707 to make peace. I wasn't the only one. 2 other POWs, Yair Barak and Avinom Kaldes, we flew together, the 3 of us. And when we were up and over the Mediterranean, heading west, close to the Egyptian coast, Avinom, who was first officer, was sitting on the right, and the captain, sitting on the left, sort of looked around and said, "You're facing the missiles." 3 years later, El Al Flight 443 takes off from Tel Aviv to Cairo. El Al lays another stepping stone for peace.
Our dream is coming true. I was talking to you for the last week that we will go to Egypt on a straight flight, on a direct flight from Israel. In a few minutes, we will have the champagne. And I want every one of you to hold a glass and say a big l'chaim.
1979, El Al loses its line to another important neighbor, Iran, the Khomeini Revolution. During